Last 3 reps. Good control on the way down. 4.
With the same side. Down with the same side.
Can you get one more? Last one. Drive up. Last 2. 10.
10.
1 more.
11.
3. 4. Clearly all different athlete profiles, but also, just as importantly, all different athlete ages as well, which gets us into our topic, long-term development. What does that mean when we're talking about fitness and quality of life, and how does it impact our programming for our autism and neurodivergent athletes? Let's get right into it. I'm Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement and bringing you a little bit more information about long-term development for our athletes. Now, as a coach or practitioner, even if you're new to fitness training for the autism and neurodivergent population, you may be working with athletes of all the same age, or you may be working with athletes of different ages, and the time you start working with that particular individual might be the first time that they are doing any type of appreciable or structured strength and fitness program. So we're obviously going to start where we need to start with that particular athlete, whether they are 5 or 15 or 55. In my own practice, I've worked with individuals from 5 years old to in their geriatric years, in their 70s. And the approach is not necessarily going to be predominantly age-based, and I'll get into that, but more the PAC profile of that particular individual, their physical, adaptive, and cognitive functioning. But first, let's operationally define long-term development with respect to fitness training. Long-term development, it simply means that we're looking on a continuum of that individual's lifetime and what fitness attributes they're going to need that are going to enhance their quality of life. So in sum, how do we make this sustainable for an individual? And certainly that is going to require us to consider and program around those 3 areas of ability, our PAC profile, the physical, adaptive, and cognitive. Now, age is going to be a factor in the development of that particular individual. So from a motor planning standpoint, a 6-year-old may not be able to do all of the things that a 16-year-old can do, and a 66-year-old may not be able to do all of the things that a 36-year-old can do, but all of these things are relative as well. Long-term development means that we are looking at the individual where they are right now and planning ahead for how are we going to, as much as is within our power and control, how much are we going to be able to provide a sustainable fitness program that they're going to be doing for years and years and years, because when is the time when you no longer need fitness, when you're no longer moving? And we want our neurodivergent athletes to be moving as long as they possibly can throughout their lifetime, not only moving, but moving well without pain or discomfort or compensation, to be moving strongly and safely with the best possible independence so that they can live their best lives. And that, of course, is the definition of quality of life and how fitness pertains to that. So reeling it back in to long-term development, when I'm working with an adolescent or teenage athlete for the first time, I'm thinking about how do I make this a part of their lives for the rest of their lives. And that comes back to the adaptive component, the behavioral component, the motivation, the engagement. How do we make this a habit for them? Now, in the neurotypical world, when we talk about sports and physical activity, many kids burn out from physical activity because it becomes a have to, or it becomes so hyper competitive that they're no longer interested. So you have kids who will play a sport for a year or a couple of years, and then they either have just bad coaching that doesn't meet their particular needs, or it becomes hyper competitive and that kid no longer wants to do it, and now we're no longer physically active because it's not a part of their day. The same thing can happen with fitness training as well. individual has a bad experience, they have a trainer who is unqualified or not knowledgeable or doesn't program well, and it simply does not work for them because that coach has not been trained, mentored, and developed, and doesn't have the capability to make that fitness training as reinforcing as it could be and working around the particular profile of that individual. And that's the way that anybody, neurotypical or otherwise, can have a negative experience that impacts their future of physical activity. In my career, have heard many of these unfortunate stories. So the first thing is not just, quote, making it fun, because we can operationally define that and it is important, but it's easy to just say, oh, make it fun. We have to make it work for that particular individual. We need to make it a positive experience for them, environmentally, coaching-wise, the way that we program. These are the things that are actually going to have a greatly beneficial impact both now and in the future for that individual. When I have a younger athlete coming in, I'm not just thinking about their physical performance, their technical acuity with each exercise. I'm thinking, how do I make it so they have a positive experience with fitness over the next couple of sessions and weeks and months and years, so that when they are 25, when they're 35, when they're 45, they have a positive regard for fitness. If we have those positive experiences, that's going to make the motivation sustainable over time too. So the long-term development starts with having a positive relationship with the coach, with the environment, with the exercises, and getting to some of those I've got this moments that we talk about in our autism fitness programming, where the athlete feels like they have ownership over the exercise, that they are confident and capable in that or multiple exercises in the program. That comes back to how do we modify or progress each exercise. Now let's talk about the programming. The programming needs to meet the particular needs of that individual, but I will say that across the board, the fundamentals, the foundation of programming is not all that different between age groups. Yes, if we're working with athletes who are younger, so under 6 years old, a lot of the motor planning skills like doing a push throw or an overhead throw with a medicine ball, doing sandbell slams, may not be there quite yet. So we, of course, need to program for that particular developmental stage. But we can have a 12-year-old athlete do squats. We can have a 62-year-old athlete do squats, because the motor skill is the same. Squatting down, coming back up. So it's not necessarily an issue of age when it comes to the exercises. We're not going to significantly change around our foundational strength exercises for a 14-year-old versus a 40-year-old. But we need to look at that particular individual and say, how do we need to modify this to their current physical needs? How do we need to coach and cue and provide positive behavior support for their adaptive and cognitive needs as well? So the programming needs to, of course, meet that particular individual where they are physically, adaptively, and cognitively right now. And then then from a longer term perspective, we need to ask, what are the goals? Where are we going with this? So here's something that comes up a lot, particularly with our neurodivergent athletes. Many who have, who we can observe have these motor and strength deficits, which is common among the autism population, will need a lot more time and practice in order to independently master a squat or an overhead press or a push-up. So whereas a neurotypical athlete may take 2 or 3 sessions to perform 10 repetitions of a push-up, even a modified push-up, our athletes need 12 or 13 or 14 or 15. I'm just making these numbers up, but a lot more sessions in order to develop that skill, even at a modified level. This means with respect to programming, we just don't change it out for the sake of changing it out, or it's been 10 or 12 weeks, so we're just going to change it out. Long-term success with strength, with fitness, with those motor skills is going to take a micro and a macro perspective. So if we pull the lens back to the wide view, of course, over time, we want the athlete to progress and be able to perform that push-up or that squat or that overhead press independently. But what do we need to do right now in this session in order to support safe and appropriate and effective technique of that exercise? And then when we get to long-term from the perspective of programming, there's no secret. There's a lot of misconceptions about what someone needs long-term. But if we're just talking about baseline fitness and strength that is going to carry into healthy living, better performance in activities of daily living, and maintaining the lean muscle and bone density that is going to make a major difference. That's why I emphasize the word so much, a major difference in that athlete's health, longevity, and quality of life. Then we're talking about twice a week training, anywhere from, let's say, 40 minutes to an hour with the fundamental exercises. You can say them along with me if you're familiar with Autism Fitness: squat, push, pull, hinge, and carry, right? Now, how much variation an athlete needs with these over time as an athlete masters a band and then a cable row, for example, we can change around the angle of that band or cable row. We can go to single arm or a unilateral cable row. We can start, if that athlete can maintain that hinge pattern, we can start to add a bent over barbell row or bent over dumbbell rows. One of the things that we talk about in the Autism Fitness Pro curriculum is that the exercises that we utilize are not the only exercises that ever existed. They are not the only effective exercises, but they are the foundation for everything else moving forward. So as the athlete progresses and masters the squat, and then we start adding weight to it, and they can do it independently, the movement is sound, it functions well, the athlete has the appropriate stability and motor control, then we can talk about starting to add stuff. But the reality is, if the only exercises anybody ever did, because it's not their favorite thing, but fitness is still a habit in their life, and twice to 5 times a week, they were squatting, doing some type of pull down or even pull up. They were doing some type of horizontal row, like the cable row or the band row that we utilize. They were doing a heavy carry. We started to introduce the hinge. They were doing a push-up. If they had all of the foundational movement patterns covered in their program for 3 to 4 sets of anywhere from 8 to like 15-ish reps, they would be getting most of the benefit from strength training. So we don't need to deviate all that much. Long term, do we want some more variety? Absolutely. But if we get an athlete for the first time, like it's their first strength and fitness session ever at 45 years old, we're still going to need to start with the fundamentals. So the question isn't not necessarily one of age. Even when we're talking about long-term development, it's what are the current skills and attributes, and of course goals for that particular individual. And again, we don't have, it's not a cookie cutter program for everybody, but it's not everybody has their own very, very specialized, highly individualized program for them. It's taking the concepts, principles, and practices that work in strength training and applying them to that particular individual, understanding their current level of physical, adaptive, and cognitive capabilities as they relate to exercise, and programming in a way where it is going to be sustainable for them. Sustainable means that we are coaching particularly for that athlete, communicating with them effectively, and making this, doing everything in our power with the environment, with our coaching, to make this an enjoyable experience for that athlete. That's going to build habit, and that is where we get long-term development. So we have these micro goals of, in this session, our goal is to get 1 more rep, or in this session, the goal is to increase the challenge level or move closer to standard performance of that exercise. And then on the macro, we're looking, how do we make this a sustainable practice for this athlete throughout their lives as much as we can, regardless of whether that athlete, again, is 4 or 44. We're taking into account their particular profile and how do we make this part of their lives long term, because fitness is a pillar of quality of life, even if that's not fully recognized by the community yet. And strength training is the foundation of all of that. So I hope that this has been helpful in breaking down what long-term development means, both individually and as a system for the entire neurodivergent population. It starts with that first session, but how do we meet the athlete's needs so that ongoing they have a positive relationship with exercise? And even if they're not going to do it independently throughout their lives, that it's something that they are willing to try, as long as they have a coach who has the appropriate credentials, has been trained and developed, and that's where we get to the Autism Fitness Certification. If you are ready to join the movement for movement and become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro, there it is. Go to autismfitness.com. You can download the course syllabus, learn about how it works with your self-paced online course, and then your full day virtual or in-person practical that we run throughout the year, so that you get the coaching, the confidence, and the real world applicable skills that you and your athletes deserve. I'd love to know what you think. Please leave your questions and comments below. Definitely questions. I love to answer them. I'm Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement. Thank you very much for watching.
1, 2, got it. 3.